Well, folks, it's been a little while since we talked. I hope you've been rested, well fed, well nurtured, because we've got a lot of tennis, a bunch of tennis. We're going to start with the women here, but we've got a lot of tennis to cover. Steve, how's it going? How are everything's on the other side of planet Earth?
Yeah, look, it's good. It's a little bit warm here again today, but yeah, looking at the calendar over the next couple of weeks, there's quite a bit of tennis that we're going to be covering. So we'll start here with the women's and knock off a couple of tournaments here in Doha and Lyon.
Yeah, we'll start with the women. We'll do some men tomorrow. Well, we'll talk about the men tomorrow. I got to work on my phrasing there. And there's a few challenger tournaments I guess we'll try to sneak in. Hopefully, maybe we'll get a guest there. But we'll start with the big event in Doha. It's a WTA 500. Now, Steve, I don't know if that means there is 500 points. I know they adopted the names. Do you know if they adopted the actual point system?
I have hit the point where I've stopped caring what the WTA does in terms of their point system. I think you look at it like something like that on the surface and go, oh, that's fantastic. And then they just kind of find a way to completely butcher it. I don't even know if they haven't figured out a score app yet, have they? Like it's all going really well at the moment.
They still don't own WTA.com, so let's not get too excited. We've got the top half of the draw here. Let's start in the first quarter. Svitolina has a bye down at the bottom there. One of the tougher quarters, if not the toughest quarter, frankly, in this draw. You've got Azarenka in there. Hasn't played her best tennis, but we know, what she's capable of. Rybakina, same thing. Now, Rybakina is against a qualifier, and we'll clarify that a little bit. And there's just one name there that sticks out, but it looks like an okay spot for Svitolina here. I think that she has the bye. She wins her second round match. And then, Azarenka's there, Rybakina's there. I know there are power players she generally doesn't want to face, but I think given the form of those two, maybe she has a chance to catch them on an off day. I mean, I'm not betting on Svitolina. I've actually bet on Rybakina already, but, trying to make an interesting case. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think when you look at this draw, it's pretty handy having the first round bye. And look, the second round is going to be pretty favorable as well between either Zhang or Anisimova, having not played, I think, she hasn't played at all yet this year, has she? Or not for quite a while. Obviously, she missed the trip down to Melbourne due to COVID, I think it was, or some sort of quarantining issues. So, look, it's going to be tough, I think, to see Svitolina not make the quarterfinals here. But yeah, when you look to the bottom, Rybakina and qualifier probably carries a little bit more weight here than most tournaments. I think we saw the same thing happen in Adelaide as well with a couple of strong qualifying performances. But yeah, Azarenka Kuznetsova is a fascinating match, and look, it's trying to match up, with a very competitive field here, how these players who did suffer, from hard quarantine in Melbourne, how they are going to turn around now that, once they've got out and, trying to get back into position here, like Azarenka, who, looked pretty poor against Pegula in the first round of the Oz Open. But if you look at her, extended form since, August, September last year, you need to consider her.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Rybakina is pretty interesting, but there are, again, like, we kind of talked about here, there's Pegula's there in qualifiers, Krejcikova's there in qualifiers, even somebody like Siegmund could be really challenging there. I mean, Pegula is the name that sticks out to me, but any of those other names stick out to you, Steve?
Not really. No, I think it's very heavily weighted, I think, to those couple of players there. But look, I'm just more interested to see as well, I think, with this quarter, how Svitolina goes. This is the first tournament since her split from Gael Monfils, and it was obviously big news at the end of the Melbourne tennis period. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting little section. I think it's an interesting half all up when you look at this second quarter, as we've got up on the screen here as well.
Yeah, let's jump into that second quarter. Sabalenka there has a bye. Some interesting names. Kudermetova and Muguruza could be a fun first-round match, although I expect Muguruza to advance. Sakari down there. Bencic's name is here, but, Steve, do you expect her to be there against Madison Keys in Madison Keys' first match since Roland Garros last year?
Look, I would be very surprised if Bencic backed up, considering it was about 20 hours ago that she was playing the Adelaide final and wouldn't have flown out till this morning, Australian time. So it's a very quick turnaround for her, but it does present an opportunity here, I think, for Madison Keys. She didn't travel. She wasn't able to make it down to Melbourne. So, although she did have that COVID positive test that kept her out of that start. I think when we look at this section, it is an opportunity because she could then potentially have a lucky loser and then the winner of Sakkari and Sharif, to make her way through to what would effectively be, a pretty strong quarterfinal against either Sabalenka, Kudermetova, or Muguruza.
Yeah, Keys is tough to handicap. We were talking a little bit pre-show about her, and I was kind of joking around that, she's kind of had a rough go of things. But as I went to look back, she just doesn't play very often. And when she does, she actually generally plays very well. Again, we'll see if she can put it together here off a long break. But if Bencic is out, easy first round match. We've got Sakkari and Sharif there. Sakkari has had some nice run at the beginning of the season, not so well in Australia, but maybe she'd be more comfortable here. Who knows? But it could be a nice spot for Keys to win a couple matches. But at the end of the day, I think it's the winner of that Sabalenka Muguruza match that probably determines the quarter winner. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think so as well. When we get through to our picks a little bit later, I wouldn't be getting involved in a player like Madison Keys match to match, but it might be a case of, making a small outright play and just kind of letting that kind of roll through. I'd rather get involved with her at a double figure price than get involved with her as, a heavy favorite in a particular, head to head matches through here. But, I guess we need to keep an eye on, Muguruza, although she doesn't have the first round bye, so she has another match that she needs to work through. And I think her coach, Martinez, isn't in Doha with her. She did.
Do you have any concerns about that? It turns out Conchita Martinez posted today that she got COVID. It doesn't seem like she's actually been in contact with Muguruza, which, fingers crossed. I'd rather see Muguruza play. Any concerns there for you?
I don't think so, and I think from a just general game plan and setup wise that there shouldn't be. I don't think anything's drastically changing with Muguruza's game. Well, I haven't noticed anything over the last couple of years. I don't think it's too much of an issue. So look, it's we do need to keep in mind that she did have double match point against Naomi Osaka, which is a hell of a lot better than anyone else has done recently. So it is relatively decent form, but that would be a very difficult second round match with Sabalenka. Where she to get past Kudermetova there in the first.
It is still a tough draw even with those first couple matches. So I still kind of lean against Sabalenka there. What do you think? Any other thoughts on the top half of the draw here, Steve?
I think this is probably the closest I've been able to consider Svitolina in some capacity, just because of that first, those first couple of games, and to be able to try and find a little bit of rhythm. But look, it's a very stacked section. And I think, taking Bencic out, if she were to withdraw, does open up a little possibility there for, someone in that bottom section of four players, so Sakkari, Sharif, Keys, or Bencic, or whoever would take her place. So look, there's a couple of little opportunities to maybe target sections of the draw, but when you look and you consider what have we got here, out of all these players, you've got Svitolina, Rybakina, Azarenka, Sabalenka, Kudermetova, Muguruza, Sakkari, and Keys all in one half, and the potential for maybe even a Pegula or someone along those lines as a qualifier coming in. It's pretty competitive.
It really is. We didn't talk too much about Sabalenka. She's been great on hard courts. I think it all just sets up nicely for her, but that's just about it. Look,
and I think with this, there's probably 9 players here that if you insert them into the Lyon draw, they're probably either favorite or second favorite.
That's an interesting thought. Let me look at the list here. I mean, Svitolina's probably favored over Alexandrova. Rybakina probably is. Azarenka definitely is. Sabalenka definitely is. Muguruza is. Anybody else here this top half you would have favored over Alexandrova in that other draw? Not to spoil
they're probably the ones you'd have favourite over Alexandrova, but then you could probably put another 4 in a second favourite. So look, it just shows how competitive this part of the draw is.
For sure. All right, let's jump into the bottom half. Another solid section here, but this third quarter to me just presents a lot of question marks. Jennifer Brady off her best ever Grand Slam finish. Hasn't played well in these courts, although hasn't generally had a lot of opportunity. Angelique Kerber, a very curious Australian Open first round loss for her. Petra Kvitova with almost no form, but courts where she's finished second and first the last two appearances in this tournament. We'll start with that third quarter, Steve. How do you see that kind of shaking out, and do you have any strong predictions either way? Because there's a lot of uncertainty here for me.
There is a lot of uncertainty, and I think, again, when you're picking the winner of this tournament, having that first round bye is pretty handy. I gravitate in this, third quarter towards obviously Petra Kvitova, and she's shown some good form in similar conditions over the years. My big kind of question mark, I guess, and the reason why I haven't posted any outright selections yet is because putting Pegula there against Pavlyuchenkova would significantly shift this little section. I'm probably going to be keen to be against Jennifer Brady, I think, in this section. I think Kontaveit might actually be able to pull off a bit of an upset here in the first round. I think, from a, when you think about Brady's game and her heavy top spin, I actually think that works and plays right into the hands of Kontaveit and how well, she can play, particularly hitting through a strike zone off both wings. So I think there's an interesting spot there in round one. But, you look at these draws and you've got all these up and coming players who are coming through, and then it's how do you kind of match up that, does Angelique Kerber pull out another solid week that, she's bringing on from time to time. But, if Pegula isn't here in this quarter, I'd be leaning towards Petra Kvitova. How about yourself?
I think it's Kvitova or pass, but it's hard for me to trust Kvitova given how she started the season. Again, very comfortable here. A lot of question marks about Brady. She has the bye. No problem for me at all with that second round match. Kerber maybe could make a run here. I think she, to your point, if Kontaveit wins there, I'll be on her against Kontaveit in that second round match. But just too much uncertainty again for me to really have a strong feeling here. I'm going to pick Kvitova if I'm filling out a bracket, but I feel good about it. I don't feel great about it when I would expect to feel great about it,
Yeah, no, that seems fair enough. Shall we move on to the fourth quarter?
Indeed. Kiki Bertens in her first appearance since Roland Garros last year. Ostapenko, Wang Jiang, Ons Jabeur, Karolina Pliskova, and two qualifier spots. Again, two chances for some of the players we've touched on already. What do you see here, Steve?
Well, I see a little spot there next to Wang Jian's name that I hope if Pegula does win later this evening, she's able to just end up in that little section of the draw. Kiki Bertens off no tennis since Roland Garros versus Ostapenko seems like something I would really enjoy avoiding. There's just a lot there. That's a lot to process.
It's going to be a beautiful disaster of a match.
Yeah, and look, it'll be interesting to see who falls against Ons Jabeur in that first round. As a qualifier, Jabeur's had some half-decent success against Pliskova in the past. So, can be a little bit of a challenge there, but I was pretty disappointed, I think, with how she played in Melbourne. But, I'd be expecting a little bit of improvement here from her. Pliskova, I don't know.
Another great draw.
It's a great draw, but, being up 5-love in the second set to Mahova was also a great spot in Melbourne, and that ended up 5-7. So, look, it's one of those ones it's really hard to make a case for. If she wins it, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, I really should have backed her. Like, it's, she always sits around not a great value price and will just kind of potentially float her way through and play some great tennis. But I didn't see enough from her in Melbourne to go, wow, this is amazing. I'm really keen to be backing her.
Yeah, she's in the 10-1 range, and there's absolutely no value to be had there. It's a funky quarter. You make a good point. If Pegula is here, I'm going to grab her. I think we'll get a chance to bet her in the 20 to 25 to 1 range. I'm going to be really excited to do that if it happens. Otherwise, maybe Jabeur comes out. I'll hopefully get some quarter prices here. I think she could actually manage her way through this quarter. But otherwise, it's a pass for me here.
Yeah, it's funny, again, there's probably about 6 or 7 players that I wish from that top half that were inserted into this quarter, and to really kind of, shake things up a little bit, but it's just doesn't quite hold up against everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. This is definitely a top-heavy draw. So, look for some players that you like there. The bottom half, it's either hard to figure out what you're going to get, or a lot of players you're not excited for. So let's jump into our picks to win. Are you going to start, or are you going to let me go first?
I'll kick things off. I've
All right.
gone, and there's a theme with my two. So my ace and my value pick here is that I'm going for bigger strikers of the ball that could perhaps go on a little bit of a run here. So I'm not going to be getting involved in these players match to match, but I think at their outright prices that there's a little bit of value. So my pick is Petra Kvitova in this one, and I think as I said at the time, when you look at that section, she should be able to make her way through to the semifinals. You would think, and in which case she is probably going to be a decent shout, I think, against some of those other players there in the other quarter. I think she's got the potential to go on a run in these conditions here in Doha. I don't. It's not a strong selection, I think, given the strength of this field overall. But I think when I looked at the prices as well, I think this is something that she looks a little bit better value than some of the other equivalent names. I think that we see at similar odds for tournaments. How about yourself?
I've taken Arena Sabalenka. I really like her draw here. I'm not as worried about Muguruza as maybe some other people are. I think that Naomi Osaka had more of a bad day than Muguruza had a chance to win that match. Yes, she did have a chance to win that match, but I don't know if that was necessarily on her own merit. Sabalenka is 26-5 in the last year on hard courts, indoor, outdoor. She's won tournaments outside of events basically where she had low motivation, frankly, basically outside of North America last year. She's only lost to really top-notch opponents. And I don't think she faces somebody like that until the semifinals. And she might not face them at all. I don't think there's anybody in the bottom half that really scares her. As I look at the top half, it'd be somebody like Azarenka or Rybakina could really give her, as much power back as she can give. Svitolina might catch her having a bad day or something like that. But I just think this is a nice draw for her. I think she's in great form, and she's a great chance to win this tournament. So she's my pick.
And I do agree with you in that. I think, when you do look at it, her probably the match in which she'd be the longest odds through to the final would be her first match up, you would think, if Muguruza were to get through. So I think that there is value in that outright selection, I think, based on everything. And the fact that Muguruza might not even get through the first round. So I think that that seems more than reasonable. Do you want to jump straight into your value pick?
Sure, let's fire off there. Kind of teed her up a little bit. As much as I've been nice about Svitolina, Elena Rybakina, I think, has a really nice spot in this draw. I will kind of put the asterisk on here unless she has to play Pegula in the first round. I mean, Pegula really is kind of the fly in the ointment. I wish she would just somehow would have gotten into the main draw. But here we are. Rybakina was one of the best hardcourt players in 2019. Last year was pretty solid. I think it ran into a couple tough opponents here, but I like her draw. I think there's a chance Azarenka might get knocked off by Kuznetsova there in the first round. I think she is just a nightmare in terms of what Svitolina doesn't want to see when she's getting on a tennis court. And when she gets that Sabalenka match, she's right around 19 to 20 to 1. You're in a great spot there. If she can win this quarter, which is winning, 3 matches against opponents that I think, she won't be a huge favorite over, but I think she will be favored or at the very least competitive against. You're in a great spot against Sabalenka there. Sabalenka will be favored, but worst case, you can start to hedge out a little bit. I think there's definitely some value in Rybakina.
And I think they played a pretty competitive 3-set match in Abu Dhabi. I think was it the week before everyone flew out. So and that was a couple of points here or there could have turned things around. So I think that she would certainly give herself a chance. I think in that particular matchup. Now my value pick, I can't believe I'm actually doing this, but consider Madison Keys is the pick. Consider her form perhaps across this week as a little bit like, a snowball that's kind of rolling down and gaining momentum and getting bigger and bigger. And I think if you can consider, and you're either going to get Bencic, who's off a very quick turnaround and probably below 100%, or you're getting a lucky loser to start, and you're getting either Sakari or Sharif in the second round, that I think there is a potential that she could maybe build into a pretty impressive week. That being said, I'm not going to be backing her individual matches. Again, it's a little bit like Kvitova. I think that she's that kind of streaky player that could get on a bit of a run here, but I'm not. I think it's hard to find value in this draw because it is so competitive. And then, as you know, we've put an asterisk next to basically everything because Jessica Pegula on her form is pretty. She will hold her own in this tournament as a qualifier. So I think this is the one that kind of stood out more so off the fact that I think Bencic either doesn't play or is below 100%, and maybe that a bit of confidence there from Keys can kind of get the ball rolling for her.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know that having Zachary in your second match back in, however many months is less than ideal.
It is, but again, it'll be interesting. And I think Keys is one of those players that, you could put her up against probably 95% of the rest of this field. And I think if she were to hit winners and play quite well, that, the match is going to be predominantly on her racket. But again, she just doesn't play enough tennis, so it is hard to gauge. But a nice speculative value selection at bigger odds than we generally see, I guess, for her in these type of tournaments. But you have to take that risk given that she hasn't played tennis for quite a while. Now, we've got a familiar theme, I think, between our unforced errors and our overvalue to an extent. So do you want to start with your unforced error or player that you're keen to be against in some capacity here?
Talked about it before. I think it comes as no surprise that my pick here will be Belinda Bencic, coming off a run to the finals here. We don't know if she's on a plane already. She probably should be if she's going to play. I find it interesting that earlier today, Pinnacle did not actually have her price up. But I'm looking right now, they actually don't have first round lines up at all. But there were outrights places she was not listed there. There was first round matches places she was not listed there. I'm not expecting her to show up, frankly. And, again, coming off a long week as she's starting to work her way back into form, looking at this field, looking at her spot in the draw, she's like, all right, I assume she was kind of like, all right, I'm the 16th. We'll see what happens. But Keys, Zachary, Sabalenka, Rybakina, Azarenka, or Svitolina, and that's just to get to the final. I don't think she's going to be here.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same, and for basically all the same reasons you've just said there. I don't think we need to rehash over it. I'll be impressed if she does turn up and win a couple of matches. That would be a significant improvement for her. But I think, overall, it's not saying that we're down on Bencic overall. I think it was a great week for her in Adelaide to be able to kind of build. I just think in this particular spot, it becomes tricky for her.
Now, so why don't you go first then for overvalued?
Overvalued. So I have gone for Jennifer Brady. And I think with her, she's coming off the biggest loss. I mean, it's the biggest performance of her career, but it's also the biggest loss of her career. With that comes focus and a little bit more attention. As I said, I think Kontaveit is actually a pretty tough matchup for her first up. And then when you look at this section as well, it's not going to get a whole lot easier for her, I think, across the course of the week. I think when you look at the other players here and you look at perhaps who Brady beats on the way through her Australian Open run, it probably wasn't, you wouldn't consider it the strongest draw. I think that she managed to roll through. I think she's just a little bit short, I think, when you look at the market at the moment. How about you?
My overvalued pick, Alina Svitolina, and this will be a kind of a theme for me. I think we've reached a point in her career and a point in the WTA where there's just too many players that have physical talents that she can't overcome. She's 10-1 to win this tournament, and there are two players listed below her, Victoria Azarenka and Elena Rybakina, that I will be betting against her if they are underdogs in that match. I know she has a bye, and that's a big advantage here, but I can't bet Svitolina to win a tournament with a field like this, especially at 7-1.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's, I am interested to see how she turns up, but I think she's going to be reliant on other players not playing well, more so than being able to go out there and win it herself. And I think when you need and when you're backing a player like that, you're going to need a bigger price than what's currently on offer for Svitolina, particularly off I wouldn't call it, mind-blowing form from her recently.
She generally brings a solid level. She rarely doesn't, make a full effort in tournaments. So I expect her to play well. It's just, she's going to run into either Rybakina or Azarenka. and then Sabalenka or Muguruza or maybe Keys, and then Pliskova or maybe Brady if she's still motivated, or Kvitova there. It's
not getting any easier.
No, it's really hard for me to put that gauntlet together and get excited at 10-1.
Now, speaking of getting excited over things, shall we go over to the Lyon draw, which is obviously just as exciting as what we have in Doha?
There is not the same level of overall talent, if you will, but I think there's a lot of fun names here. I wish the qualifying field was a little better. I kind of understand, but I think this will be a tournament where we'll have fun watching some of kind of the younger or maybe up-and-coming players do their best or something. Who knows? Trying to be
something like that.
Yeah. Alexandrova leads the field here as the number 1 seed. Kirstea is the seed down there at the bottom of the first quarter. Again, another tournament where there seems to be quarters that are just full of more talent than others, and I think this is the best quarter there. I mean, we have Alexandrova, the 1 seed. Gracheva would normally be competitive in something like this. The winner of Georgie Kuzmova, which I expect to be Georgia, or maybe Kuzmova, shocks us to find some form. Kirstea there would be all people that we'd look to bet in a 250 indoors with these fast courts, but they're stuck with Alexandrova. What do you think, Steve?
She's very short in the market, considering. I mean, I get it. This isn't the strongest draw, but yeah, it's if you consider the form, I guess recently of some players, you can make some form of a case for Kirstea. I think. I don't think it's going to be all one-way traffic for Alexandrova, and I think the way she plays, it does generally lend to being some sort of down patches. I think we saw against Ash Barty, the Australian Open, the way she started both sets was fantastic, but the way she finished both sets was, I'm trying to think of a word that means I don't have to change this podcast to being explicit. It wasn't great. So look, I think there's potential here with some big hitters, but Kuzmova hasn't done anything of note recently. Georgie could bring you everything or nothing. So you can maybe make a case for Kirstea or someone to be a challenge, but it's Gracheva is probably one to keep an eye on. She does have some decent indoor hard court form over the last 18 months, but I think if Alexandrova brings a level that is even at kind of at 80, 85%, she should be getting out of this little part.
Yeah, I think it speaks a little bit to her desire to win this tournament, that I think she could have, gone to Doha, probably had to qualify when she made her decision, but I think any reasonable person could have looked at the list and realized that she would have gotten in with withdrawals. I think she definitely had a chance to play there, but probably looked at the field, looked at the fact that she might have to qualify, and was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to Europe. Let's go indoors on some fast courts and play a tournament where I think she is, kind of head and shoulders, frankly, above the rest of the field. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's maybe a decision that hasn't always been made by her in the past. I think she finds herself into tough draws and tough spots. Now, all of a sudden, she's the 1 seed in a decent sized tournament, and how are we going to see her, I guess, unfold here? What's going to happen?
No, that's interesting. Any other thoughts in this first quarter?
No, I reckon we keep on moving down to a interesting second quarter.
Curious would be the nicest word I could use. If you read my preview on Ace Previews for this tournament, I write a couple very optimistic sentences about Miss Mladenovic and the fact that, she really only has lost against good players. But I don't know. I don't feel great. I read that, and I wrote again as a sentence. It feels kind of dumb. I don't know. I guess so. She's in her own country. Buzarnescu still, I don't think, has sort of put together any kind of tennis, coming off her major injury and all the nonsense of last year. Zavatska is probably outclassed there in the second round. And then we have Badosa coming off super hard quarantine, just kind of a bunch of flotsam. And what do you make of all this?
Yeah, we should have started with this tournament and then built up to Doha, shouldn't we? It's a funny one. I mean, the first instinct when you look at it is, do you go, is there a qualifier somewhere in qualifying that would be able to kind of make a run through here. Maybe Towson if she were to beat Hess, but not enough to go. I'm going to jump at that opportunity. Paula Badosa, we've only seen her play once since she spent that 3 weeks in hard quarantine. In a weird way, it's probably it almost feels like the winner of Mladenovic and Buzanescu probably ends up in a semi-final. But it's, I'm looking at the odds.
Sad thought.
Yeah, Mladenovic's $1.33 or minus 300, and it's just I'm not getting involved in that.
I'm bummed. I hope you don't have anything else to say. Can we go? Can we move on? Yeah. I'm done. That makes me sad. Unfortunately, it might not get much better. Third quarter here, we got Roos at the top with Wang, Minen and Kawa, Dodana Garcia. Again, I think this is a better quarter, one of the better, definitely the second best quarter in this tournament. And I think there's some interesting matches and players in here. What do you see for this third quarter, Steve?
I see the meeting at the top of the quarter in Roos and Wang, and the meeting at the bottom of the quarter in Doden and Garcia, basically setting up probably the quarterfinal. When you look through the outright markets, I think it's like 6 of the first 7 or 5 of the first 6 in the outright markets are French. And, 2 of those are playing each other in the first round in Doden and Garcia. And I think in this draw, and I think when you're looking at it all, you probably want to find, some longer range value selection, and I'd probably lean towards Wang maybe as an outright, and I think you spoke about that too on your outright preview as well. She's got the game to be, a significant challenge. She was going to be the wild card at the Australian Open and then wasn't able to make the trip. Roos is very good on indoor hard courts, but she looks a little bit short, I think, in the odds for that first round match. But when you've got these decent outright chances playing each other early, it can make it a little bit tricky. Where are you leaning with this?
Yeah, I've got Wang actually to win that first round match, and I placed a little bit on her outright price at 50-1. I think this sets up nicely for her. Frankly, my only concern is Minen. Minen just finds a hot streak with her serve. Given these conditions, she has the game to maybe just kind of serve her way through a couple matches. But I think this sets up nicely for Wang, and even better for the winner of Dodin Garcia. Played Dodin there in the first round, and we'll see who wins. I expect it to be Dodin, but I'm going to take a look at the outright price there. I agree with you, that they're not the best prices pre-market, given the fact that they have to play each other. Caroline Garcia is right around 9-1. Dodin's right around 12-1, depending on where you look. But I asked you pre-show, after Alexandrova, who's the second best player in this tournament, and you took quite some time to answer, and it's probably the winner of this match, right?
Look, probably. It's a harder one to gauge where everyone's kind of level is, and particularly when we've got this mix of players here who travel to Melbourne and didn't travel to Melbourne, and kind of how that all kind of weighs in, and where they've been playing in the meantime. I think you could make a case, maybe for one of taking Dodin or Garcia, from an outright perspective, but pick one before and then don't get involved in just the head-to-head on the match market. And I think that's something I did, at Roland Garros. I think it was like Swiatek was playing Vondrousova in the first round, and you look at it and they're like, both fairly not short in the outright market, but you can't make a case, for getting involved there. I think, Garcia didn't do a lot in Melbourne. She had patches, but nothing to get excited about. Dodin lost in the first round of qualifying for the Australian Open. So back to the indoor does help her, and I probably, as a slight underdog, she is maybe a little bit of value there in the first round, which probably lends me to thinking that, if you had to pick out of this section, it'd be Dodin at the top and Dodin at the bottom and Wang at the top.
Yeah, I'm going to wait to see who wins this match and then take a look at the outright market. Again, they're both 10 to 12-1. If they win this match and still hang around in like 9-1 or better, maybe even 8-1 or better, I'll probably scoop that up. But for now, I'm going to wait.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best plan of attack here. Shall we move down to the final quarter?
Indeed, it's
Hmm.
not a great quarter. Alizé Cornet, Sastovich, Bouchard, a few qualifiers. And again, the qualifying field is not fantastic here. And Fiona Farrow. I was raised generally, Steve, to try not to say much if I don't have anything nice to say. So, do you have anything to say about the fourth quarter?
Well, look, I'm just going to roll straight into it while we're here. But my ace is Fiona Ferro with not a lot of indoor hardcourt form to really go off. But when you look at the quality of the qualifiers coming through here and the fact that she will only face qualifiers until the quarterfinal, it's not the worst place. She did look relatively solid against Swiatek in Melbourne at the Australian Open. I think they played. It was effectively an indoor game in one of the stadium courts. It's. I think it's tricky to look at when you look at her long term or you look at that hardcourt form. It's hard because she just hasn't played a lot of it since she kind of burst onto the scene. So it's hard to kind of marry up parts of it. But I think when you look at this, I'm sure there'll be people who are keen to make a case for Eugenie Bouchard, as there always is. But I think when you look at this section, if you had to pick someone to end up in a semi-final, and you look at this draw, and you look at the fact that Ferro is double figures in the outright market, then I'm happy to jump in.
Is the best spot in the draw. That is absolutely undeniable. These are the worst possible conditions, I think, for her game. I don't know how she can string that many matches together. I'm going to be happy to bet the winner of the third quarter against her if she's there in the semis, and we'll look to fade her if she's somehow in the finals. But I think that you have the right approach. Look for the best spot in the draw, and kind of go work backwards from there, because she does. She has the best spot in the draw. So if there's ever a chance of her making a run on fast hard courts indoors, it's now.
This is it. Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so that wraps up the chatting through of the draw. Now, I've given you my ace or my pick for the tournament. Who have you gone with?
I think it's pretty easy for the folks to guess. Alexandrova, best player, in probably the toughest quarter, but I think is still head and shoulders above any qualifier. Gracheva, I expect to be there in the second round, maybe Georgie, maybe Kirstea there. And I think by that point, she will have a little competitive tennis under her belt and basically blow through whoever she sees there in the semifinals, whoever comes out of the bottom.
Yeah. And my value pick does come out of the quarter, but again, it's not one of confidence, and I'd probably actually be backing in and going along the similar lines, I think, of your value pick. But my one was Kirstea, just because I think, she has showed some relatively decent form. She's probably the biggest threat in that section to Alexandrova. And, I'd rather be getting Alexandrova or facing her earlier in the tournament and trying to kind of catch an upset there than kind of letting the momentum roll of, 2, 3, 4 wins getting through to the final there. So, it's not a strong pick, I guess, as a value pick. Because obviously, you do have the only player, I think, in single figures in the outright markets at the top there in Alexandrova, but she's probably the biggest chance, I think, of knocking her off if she can produce what she could produce in Melbourne off, not a lot of tennis and going through that harder quarantine.
Makes
now,
sense.
who was your value pick? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit.
We did. I mentioned that I bet Wang there at 50-1. I like her draw. I like her to advance in that first round match. She's not going to be an overwhelming favorite in any of these matches, but that's what you get for 50-1. But I like her to beat Roos. I think that she has everything she needs to beat Minin. You look there, then it's maybe Dodin or somebody like that. I think she has a chance to be competitive. And frankly, at 50-1, you have a chance to set yourself up with, at least a risk-free situation in that match. So at 50-1, Wang is my value pick here. And I've got her just for like a quarter of a unit, a smaller play again at that price, but I see value in that number.
Yeah. And I do agree with that one as well. And I think the 50-1 probably, if you were to go through her kind of match by match, I think 50-1 is probably still pretty fair. I think, when you look at the rest of the draw, that's probably better than kind of rolling over match to match. If we had a look at, so now we'll flip over to unforced errors and our kind of picks that we want to be avoiding for this tournament. My one is Caroline Garcia, and I might just flip into. So I've got unforced error, and my overvalued player is that Caroline Garcia Dodan little section. When I put this up, I mean, I don't want to get involved in a match with two of the top 5 favorites for the tournament in the first round, and I think I'd be far more inclined, like we touched on at the time, to kind of jump in maybe on the winner of that. I'd probably be more inclined, I think, if Dodan won, that I'd probably be jumping into her outright. I think she's got a higher ceiling in terms of what she can produce. But I just don't see value in their prices, I think, compared to some of the others that are out there. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think, are you still thinking, I guess, of where you're going to go with that particular first round matchup and what to do?
I agree with you that there's not value in either of their prices at this moment. Again, because they're playing each other in the first round, but I think there will be value in their prices later. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that. And that's why I'm going to wait. Like I said, I'm not going to bet Dodan or Garcia to win this tournament, but hopefully it's Dodan. If Dodan wins there, I'll probably be looking to grab her.
Yep. Yeah, that seems fair. Now, who's your unforced error?
Paula Badosa has played one tennis match in the last 6 weeks. How do you trust somebody like that? It's at a time where a lot of other players are starting to find a little bit of form. They've kind of got some footing and played some competitive matches, gotten used to a little bit of travel. She is just way behind the 8 ball. She does have an easy draw. I mean, Tan is a wild card, again, in her home country, has a decent serve. We'll see. Badosa's taken money there in that first round match, but I'm staying way away from her given how little she's played.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that match against Samsonova, she was 5-3 up in the third and lost it 7-5. So, whilst there's also the physical component that can be missing when you're away from the game for an extended period of time, there's also, the fact that, the ability to stay mentally switched on in those moments wasn't quite there for her in that first round. And then she pulled the pin on, I think she was going to play both of the follow-up tournaments and pulled the pin and left the country. So it'll be interesting to see how she backs up here. Now, my overvalued player, I've already kind of touched on mine with Garcia and Dodan. Do you have a particular player or players in mind for yours?
It was hard for me to pin down one because I'm ready to just get rid of the entire fourth quarter. It blows my mind that Corday is 11 or 12-ish to 1. Sasnovich is around 13 to 1. Bouchard's around 18 to 1. If you're interested in betting those, reach out to me. Happy to take your money. Might even give you a better number. I know that you picked Ferro to win the tournament. Okay. I mean, she's got a really great draw, but she's 10 to 1.
Well, someone has to come out of the quarter.
She's 10 to 1. I don't care. Somebody has to come out, but she's going to be a huge underdog to everybody the rest of the way. I mean, I guess maybe that third quarter is just a mess, and I just have a lot of faith in Alexandrova in general, but I guess you're right. Somebody has to win, but at these prices, again, everyone's in the 10 to 1 range. Huh?
Yeah. Yep. That's fair. That's
the whole thing. Tuck it out.
Yep. Fair enough.
Again, you only picked Ferro to win. You didn't say you were going to bet on her. I mean, would you bet on her at that number? It seems like the consensus price on Ferro, again, is about 10.5 to 1.
Yeah, I'd probably be wanting kind of 12, 13. I'm still going to think about it, but I don't think, I think as we kind of touched on, she's valued due to the position that she's in the draw, and not much else really.
As I go down every player in that fourth quarter, I'd want a better number to a significantly better number. So I don't have the whole chunk. All right, Steve, I think that's everything. Do we have anything else we need to mention for the WTA? Again, we'll be back tomorrow. Still trying to figure out the time, and Candace will hopefully be back with us. She is very, very busy helping the people of Idaho get their news or something. She'll probably watch this and then correct me or something about that later. But we'll be back tomorrow at some point, and tomorrow being, wherever you are, to talk men's tennis. And then what do you think, Steve? We're gonna get to Challenger this week. I feel optimistic. I
think so. I think we can get into it. Look, it's going to be a busy kind of couple of weeks here, but looking forward to. It's just nice having tennis on again. This time a year ago, things were starting to wind down just before Indian Wells, so it's good to kind of hopefully keep the momentum rolling. And yeah, hopefully there's some quality tennis here across all levels over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for listening. Give us a thumbs up, a like, whatever on whatever app you're using to watch. If you are listening to this as a podcast, a rating or review would be much appreciated. And you can find us on Twitter at Eat Sleep Tennis, so you get all this good stuff as quickly as possible. That's it for me, Steve. Have a great week, everybody.